whether it was the dockers, the print workers, the miners, the shipbuilders, the steel workers. Myself and Dick actually stewarded those marches, and that was the context in which the Workers' Beer Company was set up.
I haven't got much to say. It's the evening of the election, and it's up to you.
It came from a ruthless determination from a few men to create mounting chaos. They're not the massive trade unionists, but there are a few militants who are the wreckers.
What you gonna do?
They seek to use freedom in order to destroy freedom.
We won't go away. 'Cause we
They must not succeed.
stand there like popcorn if you want to. We can't force you to enjoy this nuisance. You take or leave it well, carry on regardless. And you don't like it, you don't have to use it.
The Callaghan government immediately before hadn't been exactly, a bunch of cherries, but it's still, nonetheless, it did seem, this is unbelievable that what we were now going to get was going to go that way.
Well, the winter and discontent was actually what precipitated the actual the demise of the Callaghan government and the election of Thatcher, and that's really where that's the political context in which we're looking.
There was a lot of industrial strife during the 70s, which led to numerous industrial disputes.
That was a very challenging time for the Trades Council and the labour movement altogether.
They came in quite energetically, looking to experiment with policies that the central office of the Tory party were interested in.
Nobody knows them, nobody ever will, until their backs are broken, their dreams are stolen, and they can't get what they want, then they're gonna get angry. It ain't written in the papers, but it's written.
Things such as were happening in other places, like the closure of all the heavy industry that had existed in Wandsworth, just disappearing.
Generally speaking, it was the first of many serious attacks upon the labour movement. And we were involved in all of that, and by and large we were backpedaling but trying to put a brave face on it all.
Whatever you do, said Mr Thatcher, it won't work, don't even try. And so in the 70s we were struggling against those ideas as they came forward, and then of course when Thatcher won in 79, that battle really began in earnest.
Great Britain was coming to terms with what it was going to become, really, rather than what it had been.
The company came from the grassroots, a genuine grassroots movement, which started down in Battersea.
Very powerful history in that part of South London. Very powerful history about trade union organising.
It was our involvement in the labour movement in the district that actually sort of enabled us to sort of get involved in the different projects that were coming around the line.
Even within the general political climate, Wandsworth, where we were, was on the front line at the same time. So it was an easy thing to get off the ground, actually, because there's so many enthusiastic people.
The Labour GLC was elected, and Livingston became leader.
And the Junction Resource Centre was funded by the GLC, and it was very much actually, and Dick was down there as well, and Dave Pears and a whole range of others. And that basically, they were very much at the centre of things.
And that's where the Trades Council did meet for a whole period of time.
The GLC, in a sense, rode partially to the rescue. It funded the Resource Centre, Law Centre, other bodies in Wandsworth, which helped to sort of keep the fight going.
But we also used the facilities we had to agitate, and agitation is a great thing to be able to do, particularly if the Conservative government is paying for it.
Between 1979 and about the 5 years that followed, I would say probably half the actual membership of in the unions in the area actually disappeared. So in point of fact, if the Trades Council hadn't actually gone down the fundraising route, the likelihood is that the Trades Council would have disappeared.
We were in that state where we were trying to resist what we saw as things that were going to change our lives, other people's lives, and we had no money to do it.
Why we needed funding, why we as Battersea and Wandsworth Trades Union Council always wanted to sort of have additional money was because we wanted to do additional things.
We put our energies into making sure we had the resources and the sinews to carry on campaigning on our own agenda, and fundamentally it meant money.
A lot of us have been doing benefits in community centres and in pub rooms. We never made any money on putting on a benefit because the person that made the money was the person with the bar. And we had figured this one out, that if you wanted to make money from a benefit, you had to sell beer.
County Hall was opened in 1922 with full pomp and ceremony by King George V and Queen Mary. It was to become known as London's own Parliament.
Under Labour control, it expanded its role in education, building model schools and taking on vast housing schemes. It was in the vanguard of municipal socialism.
Now, our first activities as a trade union council were organising free concerts that the GLC funded. Small grants, £15,000, £20,000, but we'd get 30,000 people there.
What the GLC did was provided space for those people to operate and to do things.
There were things that the GLC put on while it still existed, because it had this idea that it would be good to, you know, a good public provision is to give people a chance to get out and enjoy themselves.
And it was retailing the beer at those big GLC festivals that really started giving us, you know, the opportunity and making our mark, really.
The GLC has designated 1984 as anti-racist year. As well as fighting the government's abolition plans, it's been mounting a campaign to get a fairer deal for the black community in jobs, education and housing. Today's rally marked the high point of that campaign. London's official town crier was getting into the spirit of the occasion, and there was even a guest appearance by the American pop star Stevie Wonder.
You know, huge activities I'd mentioned around the anti-apartheid movement and, you know, that sort of thing. And, you know, we were able to, you know, participate in all of that.
A national anti-apartheid march was coming down to Clapham Common and coming over the bridge, coming into our borough. And we gave them a very special welcome. I remember we built a giant puppet, a 40-foot puppet, to welcome them over the bridge. And then we put on a bar on Clapham Common. We sold so much beer that day that record stayed for many, many years. And that was where we really cut our teeth on those very big events.
We were trading really unincorporated from 1980 until 1985. So we had 5 years worth of trading experience under our belt by the time we actually set the company up.
During that period we were doing these events, and we did some really nice events with all sorts of really nice artists. Good, you know, good music, which is where we first met Billy Bragg.
Well, I particularly remember playing a gig in Battersea Park, which was just massive. I don't know how many people were there, but it was huge. There was 5 or 6 stages. You know, there's photographs of me on stage and I look like I'm playing some great big stadium somewhere, but it's actually in Battersea Park.
And wouldn't it be really nice to have bars that were run by an organisation that somehow put the money back into the community rather than just it being some guy with money who was putting it in his back pocket?
A very simple idea, an incredibly simple idea, because it twinned up the need to raise funds inside the movement with the realities of life.
Because I also knew a bit about organising gigs, I somehow ended up being given the job of organising this thing called Jobs Year.
2,500 trade unionists came to give their support as the marchers, most but not all of them unemployed, headed south. As they walked, they knew the person they most wanted to put their grievances to at the other end. Mrs. Thatcher had already indicated she would not meet them in London.
I've been at work for 4 years.
The GLC wanted to put on Jobs for a Change, and they agreed to do it in partnership. And the upshot of it was really that the Trades Council managed to run a big bar there and make money on that bar. And I think the model definitely came from that.
The money that was made was beyond the beer company's wildest dreams. I'm still saying beer company, but at the time it was Battersea and Wandsworth Trade Union Council who'd made this money selling beer. It was like, what do we do with this money? And one of the things we decided quite quickly was, a group of individuals shouldn't have this amount of money knocking around. We must have a proper legal structure. we came up with this idea that there was a musical song in the 1930s, a trade union song, about the very fat man that watered the workers' beer. And I won't sing the song because it will just sound terrible, but the chorus line is, I'm the man, the very fat man who waters the workers' beer. And of course that was just an interim name, and we were going to find a proper name after a bit, but it stuck.
I first became aware of the beer company when it was being started through my good friend Dick Musket. He told me the idea that him and some colleagues from Battersea Trades Council were planning to set up this company selling beer.
Difficult to recollect exactly when it was. Myself and Steve Pryle, Dick Musket and Dave Pearce all sat down in the Beehive pub up on St John's Hill in Battersea.
I wasn't at the meeting in the Beehive, as far as I can remember.
It evolved. It evolved, and we all have memories of what we think was the crucial sort of was the crucial meetings.
And I'd say that was sort of late 1983, with the idea of creating a company that would be owned by the Trades Council, that would actually work in, it would have profit as its aim. It would be a limited company, so it would have profit as its aim.
And then, obviously, in terms of the mobilisation that was actually going on, in terms of actually sort of, you know, Dick Musket and a whole range of other people, you know, actually pretty fundamental to actually building up the corpus of policy that actually meant to make up the Workers' Beer Company.
But because we were dealing with booze and we were handling money, it had to be quite a tight or disciplined organisation because, you know, to put it crudely, we didn't want people pissing away the profits or simply walking off with them in a fit of absent-mindedness.
A small group of people initially, but a larger group of people thereafter that became the Workers' Beer Company Committee, all of whom had got very strong sort of ethos of social conscience, really, and social conscience would be at the heart of it rather than this particular style of left-wing politic or that particular style of left-wing politic.
We spent a long time 20 years ago trying to work out how we could build a constitution that would stop any tiny faction taking it over, because we wanted it to be for the broad, for the betterment, so we could put the money into the movement in the widest sense. And I don't believe that desire, that ambition has gone away. It shouldn't go away.
I think Steve was visionary in how he took us forward. I mean, that's why I said it was, left to the likes of me. I was still doing, an event in Battersea Park.
We evolved, I think, uniquely the system of involving labour movement organisations, Labour Party branches, trade union branches, other community groups, in providing volunteers, and we would pay the organisation. So we tried to get a collective element into the whole concept.
And the insight that we could get the campaigns and the labour movement bodies to give us the bar staff in return for paying them the money. That was I had that insight. I was the one who actually said, this will work.
Yeah, I think the fundamental thing that sustained us and kept us going through some very difficult times was the demand placed upon us by the survey organisation.
Individual campaigns, local campaigns, national campaigns, international campaigns that we wanted to support.
Nicaragua Solidarity Campaign, CND. There was no other place in the 80s and early 90s they could get that kind of money. They weren't getting it from the trade union movement, they weren't getting it from anywhere else. So, they were clearly pushing us to make sure we continued to get bigger and bigger events so they could raise that money, and that was one of the great achievements of the beer company.
I think the motivation was, we could make money for good causes here. We could actually, there is a way of putting money back into the trade union movement without having to just do bucket collections outside tube stations.
What happened was that this huge new source of finance was put at the disposal of the labour movement instead of it all being, as usual, going to Murdoch and big business.
There was a certain, also, I think, well, certainly for myself, there was a feeling of political impotence. And yes, working for the beer company, doing work with the beer company, knowing that the money was going to progressive causes, it was actually, it was felt like a part of a resistance.
seen in this country is the emergence of an organised revolutionary minority who are prepared to exploit industrial disputes, but whose real aim is the breakdown of law and order and the destruction of democratic parliamentary government.
When she says enemy within, she means within the country, against the people of this country. We're not the enemy within in that case, but we're the enemy within against Thatcher, because we are Thatcher's enemy. There's no way we'll let her have her own way, and that's what she don't like about it. She's got to pull us down.
Clearly the miners' strike is where, again, that government takes on the miners as the most strong and important area of organised labour, which has got to be beaten if they're going to try and beat us all down. And that meant that that struggle involved all of us who were trade unionists up and down the country.
We were fighting against soldiers, police, the government, and shame on the government to this day, because to actually declare war on their own workers, for me, can never be forgiven. I first met people in Battersea and Wandsworth TUC 21 years ago when we were on strike and it was Christmas, and we were looking at a very bleak Christmas for all us communities and families, with no money, with no job prospects, and if truth were known, we were facing defeat.
It was something that everybody rallied round, really. And in Battersea, we affiliated with a number of different trade unions, a number of different NUM branches. We affiliated with a branch down in Kent. We affiliated down with a branch in Wales, and we, generally had them staying at our houses. We were feeding them, looking after them while they were out fundraising in London. We were doing fundraising left, right, and centre.
Now, there's fundraising of all kinds that's going off at present time. There's concerts and folk concerts and all types of fundraising events within these communities, and there's a play called Bread and Roses.
They're trying to break union.
How do you know so much about it?
We had a lad from there up at Pitt.
Oh, a Pitt?
Aye, they were outside collecting when we come off just now.
I never saw him.
Happened he'd been wound off there.
Did you get him out?
Of course we did. And some breakfast.
He must have thought all his birthdays had come at once.
Myself and 2 or 3 other people set up a company, an organisation called Pedal Against Pit Closures, which essentially was doing sponsored bike rides to and from London to different pits, and we'd get sponsorship for it.
And they raised £13,000, which actually paid for a full Christmas dinner and tea and presents for 850 striking miners and the family. And that is one act which, even 21 years on, I can't come to terms with, that somebody down south that living in a big city that's got good prospects would give up their time, efforts and energy to support us that really needed it at that time.
And that really was a relationship then that was, sort of 100% formed.
I mean, in London too, it occupied time and minds of massive amounts of people from different campaign groups and from the trade unions in raising funds, in going up to support people, try and go to the picket lines.
The generosity of people down south astounded us, because we came back with buckets full of money all the time. But it weren't just money that we needed. We needed support, we needed moral support, as confidence were going down and down every week with striking miners going back to work.
Having people down from the coalfields to London as well for fundraising and explaining to people at large what the issues were.
And over the next weeks and months, almost a year, they became part of our lives, and that we formed friendships that go on today, over 20 years.
My first real exposure to the miners from Derbyshire was at Gay Pride in Kennington Park, where I saw huge, burly, tattooed miners dancing with the drag queens in an open field.
Those miners became the backbone of our serving community, in terms of service for the Workers' Beer Company. Subsequently became the backbone of much of our management.
The miners did the labour work, that's doing all the cellars and all the umping and physical work on that first bar in that park. And that was the very first one that they did, and there's been a miner present at 99% of every event that the beer company's done since.
Ken Livingstone became very unpopular with the Tories. From his office overlooking the Thames, which this morning he was tidying up for the last time, he supported extreme left-wing politics and was generous in his financial support for fringe bodies. That support led to headlines like these: "The loony left lashes out on beer, women and song," and "You mustn't refuse cake from a gay." All this activity by Ken Livingstone infuriated the Tories, and it made Mrs. Thatcher even more determined that he and the GLC should be closed down.
It was pretty intense times for all of us, and lots of us in public service. I mean, you know, in terms of where we worked, you know, right the way through, you know, local government and local government in particular.
You know, we were no longer being able to rely on grants anymore from the GLC. Thatcher was getting rid of all that type of stuff. So we had to become self-funding, self-financing.
It was clear that, you know, the days were numbered. She would be able to get rid of its existence entirely.
I mean, at that point, we needed a bit of luck.
We got to know Michael Eavis really through his nephew. His nephew was one of the talent buyers, one of the programmers, the promoters, the bookers for the GLC, a guy called Tony Hollingsworth. And Tony was, you know, we got to know Tony through doing the bars and being involved with the GLC festivals.
He was doing some stuff for them, he was doing some concerts for them, and then he came to work for, well, I mean, I've known Tony all my life, obviously, but when he came and gave me a hand, you know, in 1980, 81.
And Tony, in the course of events, said to us, Glastonbury has real problems with having a bar.
Tony came up with the idea of the beer company actually doing the beer because it was socially sort of sound and everything.
And then Michael actually felt we were a fit to do the Glastonbury Festival.
Bringing people together, Michael loved the idea of us bringing groups down that were working for campaigns, because he was very big on that.
And Steve and I went down and, you know, chatted to Michael, and again, it was an easy relationship because our politics were similar, and you know, we started doing the beer, and subsequently started doing more than that.
He didn't want it to be too commercial, he didn't want it to be a complete sort of drunk fest. So Tony effected the introduction between what the embryonic Workers' Beer Company and Michael Eavis, and from that we ended up working at Glastonbury.
So it's Tony's little number, this one, but Tony came and went and saw and conquered and left and disappeared. But Workers' Beer is still here.
I specialised in the commercial side of things. Melvin specialised in the production side of things. Melvin was a lighting spark at Thames TV, and Melvin was an incredibly practical person.
He's worked very hard. He's, you know, he's one person that never counts the hours. He's driven up and down the motorway like in chase of licences on behalf of all of us, really.
So as well as being a political visionary, I mean, he actually also was very, very good with his hands, and you know, he was able to sort of put together the electrics and all the rest of it.
A unique festival man.
He was also a very good organiser, and so he quite quickly became one. Michael Eavis liked him a lot, and he had a good relationship with Michael, and we then helped Michael, he helped Melvin in particular, helped Michael organise stewarding and the sort of control of the gates.
Melvin then came along as part of the Workers' Beer package, I think, because they helped with some of the stewarding and some of the controlling the gates and that kind of thing. So that they put forward a whole lot of stewards to do the gate stewarding.
Which was chaotic. And Melvin played a major role, and that was part of the beer company.
It's been a bad week for lovers of Glastonbury. The Summer Rock Show has been cancelled this year after thousands of people jumped a fence to watch last year's festival.
So I thought that when I was in trouble later, I wanted Melvin back, you see. So then 20 years after that, or 15 years after that, I was on the phone to Melvin again, because I worked with him, you know, through the 80s, and I knew what sort of fellow he was and what he could do.
And in the very first Glastonbury, Jerry Gleeson actually specialised in getting the staff.
The experience was what a better way to get your trade union branch going than to take them on a big party and raise money at the same time. So you don't have to do any more jumble sales. You could just come away for the weekend, all camp together. I mean, it was a really good organising tool for the people.
At the end of the day, you've got to have a sense of humour to work with a workers' beer company at times. You've got to admit that one, because it is fun. You know, at night when we're trying to sup a tanker dry, when Tim's not looking, and having a drink and getting to know the others in the village, it's fun, you know. And if it weren't fun, if it were just a job, people wouldn't come.
Given their expertise in logistics, i.e. handling great heavy weights like beer barrels, building tents and dealing with the infrastructure on sites, we were able to give them lots of work on a voluntary basis to start off with. And the whole thing grew and grew, and they have taken on responsibility for putting together the site down at Glastonbury, which consists of 10 bars and workers' villages, etc. And out of that came their own company, Clause 4.
I call myself now, from being a social agent provocateur to being a socialist entrepreneur. Because 5 years ago, we realised that we were too big just working as an arm in the workers' beer company, and Battersea and Wandsworth TUC gave us the opportunity and the chance to form our own limited company. Clause 4, we started 5 years ago,
is now promoting trade union related events, doing all sorts of stuff within the movement.
Their entrepreneurial spirit as well, I guess, to build something for themselves because the mines had closed down.
You know, the can-do attitude of the guys from the coalface, literally the guys from the coalface, who stood shoulder to shoulder in really difficult conditions, and then sort of transposing those skills into an environment like a rock and roll festival. Completely unfazed by anything, wading through 6 foot of mud and, you know, with their trucks stuck out here, there and everywhere.
It was sinking into the ground, and we were running around trying to find a forklift truck to pick it up. And by the time we came back, the miners had lifted it by hand, by putting sleepers under, and had lifted it, and that was the kind of thing they used to do in the mines, I suppose. So they brought a whole new set of skills that we didn't have, and we've worked with them very closely ever since.
What we've demonstrated is what we know, you know, working class communities working together. And through the movement, there's very little they can't achieve.
Everything's got a solution. That's socialism to me. There's always a solution to a problem if you choose to work together in order to find it.
and I'd like to think that wherever we go, that the ethics of the trade union movement and the camaraderie we take to sight, which only people we work with can testify to.
Some of the most important people we've met and worked with over the years have been promoters. People like Vince Power.
When I first decided I was going to buy a Reading Festival, that was '88, and then '89 I started to put it together.
We did Reading in '89 with